The number of Stephen King adaptations we received from the hands of Hollywood are so vast that you cannot even fit them on a single shelf. The man has so much adaptable material that it might as well be a subgenre of its own. There's no denying that he's become a household name, and his stories, minus their endings, made a mark on popular culture, whether it be science fiction, horror, or fantasy. And the ones who raised his reputation to new heights were the prestigious filmmakers set to honor his craft. He had some adaptations that were faithful while taking artistic liberties, such as Carrie, Misery, and Stand By Me, and films like The Shining, where Stanley Kubrick deviated so much from the original source material, but garnered the critical acclaim that it absolutely deserved, earning its status as an achievement in horror filmmaking. As for the other filmmakers that made such masterpieces as The Langoliers, The Dark Tower, Firestarter, and Cell, they didn't even try. But what if I told you that the film we are reviewing right now is the first ever story that Stephen King has ever written, but not the first he's ever published? The first he has ever written on a piece of paper, typed on a typewriter, since he was only a freshman at the University of Maine in the mid-1960s. The stepping stone of his career and his literary skills as a whole was none other than The Long Walk. The central premise is that it's set in a dystopian, grim 1970s America controlled by a militaristic, totalitarian regime, all under the rule of a shadowy, overseeing major. The movie doesn't specify the year that it takes place on, but given the book's release and the time of it being published, 1970s feels like a more apt decade for this film's overall world. There exists an annual state-sanctioned televised competition known as the Long Walk, where 100 boys, and in the movie it's 50, are either chosen or volunteered on their own volition to continuously walk a long road, all within the limit of 3 to 4 miles per hour. Those who would fail to reach the required limit would get their first warning. If one were to receive 3 warnings, they get their ticket to the afterlife. And all this will happen until there is one remaining champion. The winner will not only receive wealth, but the ultimate prize, which is a reward that is anything they've ever wanted. Among many boys, the competitors that we follow are Ray Garrity, the main character of the film, and Peter McVries, a charismatic, fearless leader who Raymond befriends along the way. But the question remains, who will get the ultimate prize and who will be the last walker standing? There was potential for conceiving an adaptation for the big screen. The only difficulty is that the executives couldn't find the right director to fulfill those ambitions. From Frank Darabont, who's had experience adapting novellas and novels such as The Green Mile and The Shawshank Redemption, to Andre Overdahl of Trollhunter fame, to the godfather of the zombie genre himself, George A. Romero. It wasn't until finally the executives chose a director by the name of Francis Lawrence. And for a project like this, it makes sense to give him the directing position, given his credentials on the post-apocalyptic I Am Legend, and 4 of the 5 movies of the young adult dystopian sludge that is the Hunger Games franchise. Actually 5 of 6 if you count Sunrise of the Reaping, which is coming out next year, but I digress. Before watching this movie, I had this little thought in my mind that it was just going to be a bog-standard Hunger Games-esque storyline with no characters that I particularly care about, set in a dystopian Maine. This one legitimately surprised me by how sensational it is. The Long Walk is undoubtedly one of the best movies of the year, and there was not a stutter or a moment of hesitation within that delivery. Out of all the Stephen King adaptations that I have seen as of late, Francis Lawrence's adaptation is a masterful retelling of a heavily acclaimed novel that after you've finished watching the movie, it will leave you traumatized and speechless as if your soul was sucked out of your body. A suspenseful, macabre, and saddening punch to the gut that never relinquishes its punches while unfolding an emotional narrative. In regards to the source material itself, the book was widely considered by many people to be an allegory of the Vietnam War, a story of boys being taken in to participate in such a torturous event in a search for glory while being watched by the public as they view the spectacle and horror. You can definitely connect the dots if you pay attention to the more subtle details in the story, like the cameras televising the boys in the same way that cameraman would when following soldiers on the fields of Nam, pieces of dialogue like a character saying that I was picked, but I didn't choose to volunteer, and others talking about the lives that they have back home and wondering what they plan to do when they achieve the prize. But even without mentioning the allegory, it still works as a narrative about brotherhood and sacrifice, and a lot of it is carried by the characters. Francis Lawrence and writer J.T. Molnar do a terrific job of characterizing these boys that you follow, as well as handling their psychology. In the first and second act, the boys exchange terrific chemistry with one another, whether it's ribbing on each other, giving advice, or helping each other stay alive, or telling each other stories that are very dramatic and even at times hilarious, exchanging their wants, their needs, their desires, and all of it is complemented by the amazing performances. Cooper Hoffman and David Johnson are both outstanding as Ray Garrity and Peter McVries, one of whom is more to himself but still has a secret vendetta against the Major on his mind, and the other being a boisterous, friendly, and charismatic figure. And a lot of this movie is carried by these two actors and the brotherly friendship that they have for one another. The film does a good job at making you believe their camaraderie, and you buy the fact that both Ray and Peter are very dependent on each other's survival and are willing to risk their lives for one another. The supporting cast that our main characters come across have a lot going for them outside of the basic Stephen King archetypes. Ben Wong does well as Hank Olsen, the small know-it-all with a very raunchy attitude. Tut Nyote plays the character of the loyal Arthur Baker admirably, and Charlie Plummer unnerves the audience as Gary Barkovich, a braggart that is, shall we say, not so right in the head. But as the story continues, the psychology of these boys descend from being competitive and courageous to desperate and outright insane, doing things to get each other killed, attempting to rebel at one point, helping each other stay alive, or accepting the reality that there's nothing that they can do to help each other. Their sanity shatters while trying to hold on to whatever humanity that they have left. The most devastating part about The Long Walk is how inevitable it feels. It's predictable, but in a consistent and narratively captivating way. When the boys have met their end of the line, you hate for any of them to be picked off one by one, even the ones who you feel like really deserved it. But as the film goes along, you just desperately want there to be a winner so that the violence would end, essentially placing yourself in the boys' shoes. You can't help but think to yourself, for every single one of them, these boys had lives. They had families that cared about them. They had aspirations, and now they're being placed into such a hellish and torturous situation, given the frightening control and world building that is being controlled by this totalitarian, militaristic regime. And I think it's incredibly unfair to just call this movie nothing but characters walking and talking while there's endless successions of blood and violence throughout. But throughout the hour and 40 minutes of runtime, the film is not exploitive with its violence. Every time a character dies or when violence is exposed, it is only there to fulfill one singular purpose: to show how nightmarish the gravity of the situation and the entire setting is. This is not an environment or a competition to mess around with or even escape from. It isn't fun. Got your legs rolled over by a tank? That sucks. Want to take a number 2? Well, here's your third option. 5.56 by 45. Time waits for no one, son, so get on moving. Forget to tie your shoe, or is your foot bleeding? Prepare to meet the hospital in the sky. At the same time, it also demonstrates the nefariousness of the Major. And speaking of which, Mark Hamill is flat out evil as the bloodthirsty, grizzled old leader. His no-nonsense, cold, apathetic demeanor perfectly suits the character, as he fills the boys with nothing but rage and despair every time he shows up. And one more thing I forgot to mention about the supporting cast: as much as she's been typecast to play motherly roles in several films she's appeared in, Judy Greer is actually quite phenomenal as Ray's mom, as she plays the character with grief and horror in her heart, knowing to herself that she could lose the only part of her family that is still alive. As for how it compares to the book, I can't really tell you because I haven't even read the book. However, I did do some research on the movie before going into the book, and one of the things that really surprised me the most was the ending. Yes, it is very different from the book, but within the context of the movie, the payoff and the execution of the ending is actually incredible. And despite coming across as bleak and soul-draining, it still manages to find one glimmer of hope after what transpired. The Long Walk isn't so much as a horror movie as it is a terrorizing dystopian drama that displays the importance of friendship, brotherhood, pain, and sacrifice, that it ranks as one of my contenders for Best Movie of the Year. It's one of those unsettling, macabre stories that you hear how devastating it is, and when you actually come across it and experience it for yourself, it will blow you away in the best way imaginable. Something like a Cormac McCarthy book, like Blood Meridian or The Road. It's a powerful, graphic walk worth traveling, and frankly, I can't rave it highly enough. Until we meet this movie again, hopefully in January, my name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.